Break free from worry with these 10 empowering Stoic principles. I want to take you on a journey where we see worries not as crippling burdens but as signals, guiding us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves. Imagine a vibrant thumbnail that catches your eye, a statue of Marcus Aurelius illuminated by a soft, golden glow, suggesting timeless wisdom. The background is chaotic, maybe storms or swirling clouds, yet the statue stands calm and resolute. You see that imagery and the title, Break Free from Worry with these 10 empowering Stoic principles. Instantly, there's a spark in your mind. Could these ancient teachings really help me thrive in the chaos of modern life? Let's dive in. In our very first minute, I want to open with a dramatic scene. Maybe we see someone on the brink of losing their job, feeling alone in an unfriendly city, or at the receiving end of some catastrophic news. But here's the twist. Instead of falling apart, they stand steady, breathing evenly, repeating a line you might recognize from Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That, right there, is your first glimpse into what Stoicism can do. I promise we're about to uncover more. And let me ask you, what if everything you need to control your life is already within you? Yes, that question lingers, quietly rattling your mind. It's a question worth revisiting. Stoicism is an ancient philosophy founded in Athens by Zeno of Citium. Though centuries have passed, its relevance is more pronounced than ever. In a world of unrelenting notifications, shifting global dynamics, and personal struggles that range from heartbreak to financial pressures, Stoicism stands as a practice to find inner calm. Its core revolves around understanding what is and isn't in our control. Epictetus, once a slave, taught that real freedom doesn't come from external conditions, but from your mindset. Seneca, a statesman navigating the pitfalls of imperial Rome, wrote letters that guide us on how to transform adversity into growth. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world at the time, had to juggle war, politics, and personal tragedy, all while penning reflections on how to remain unshaken. But let's not just read about them. Let's see them in action. Picture yourself standing in a busy city crosswalk, traffic raging from all sides, horns blare, you're carrying way too many bags, and the world feels like it's moving faster than you can handle. You check your phone, see a new social media post, and feel a pang of inadequacy. Someone else is doing better, living bigger, shining brighter. You feel that swirl of anxious energy right in your gut. Stoicism whispers that most of these stressors are outside your circle of control. Traffic? Not in your control. The curated social media images? Also not in your control. But what is in your control? Your response. The lens through which you interpret these events. Your internal resilience. In the modern world, we find ourselves on a hedonic treadmill, racing after the next big thing, the next promotion, the next relationship, the next gadget, yet we're rarely satisfied, often left only more anxious or disillusioned. Stoicism isn't here to kill ambition. It's here to refine it. Instead of wanting more stuff, we refine how we judge success. Instead of seeking validation from 1,000 empty likes, we learn to validate ourselves by living in accordance with our values. That's the promise of Stoicism. Now, I propose we explore 10 empowering Stoic principles that can help us break free from worry. Each principle acts like a stepping stone in a turbulent river, allowing us to cross to the other side unscathed. But these aren't just bullet points to memorize. They're living ideas we must practice daily. I want to weave them into our story, so by the time we finish, you'll have a tangible sense of how to apply them. Before we dive in, I want to re-emphasize that shocking question. What if everything you need to control your life is already within you? Let that resonate. Why? Because Epictetus said we're not disturbed by things, but by our judgments about them. In other words, if we can shape our perceptions, we can shape our experiences. And if we shape our experiences, we can transform worry into a state of poised vigilance or even calm readiness. Our journey begins with a historical flashback. Marcus Aurelius. Despite commanding armies and wrestling with the fate of an empire, he would slip away to write meditations to himself. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. That line hammers a crucial point. The difference between thinking and doing. How often do we brood over worries instead of taking the next step to resolve or transform them? Now, let's construct the foundation. Principle 1, the dichotomy of control. We cannot control everything that happens to us, sickness, job layoffs, or a random insult, but we can control how we respond. I remember, personally, losing a dear friendship because of a misunderstanding. I was frantic at first, wanting to control how that person felt about me, wanting to rewrite the past. The more I tried, the more I realized I was clinging to what was never fully in my power. Over time, applying this principle gave me the serenity to say, I can clarify my intentions and apologize if I did something wrong, but I can't force them to trust me again. The immediate relief was surprising. Stoicism teaches that if I do my best and still face rejection, it's outside my realm to fix. We, as modern practitioners, can internalize this by doing small daily reflections. For instance, try journaling at night. Which events today were truly within my control? Which ones weren't? This simple exercise trains you to separate illusions of control from reality. And guess what? Your mind becomes calmer because you no longer wage war against the uncontrollable. You free up mental space to work on what's truly in your hands. But let's spice up the scenario with something cinematic. Imagine an entrepreneur who spent all her savings on a project that failed spectacularly. Perhaps it's a glitch in the software or a betrayal by a teammate. So many factors outside her personal domain. She's left with guilt, disappointment, and fear of judgment. Then she stumbles upon the Stoic principle. Focus on the controllables. She regains perspective. I can't change the failure now. I can learn from it, pivot my business strategy, and keep my integrity intact. That, in essence, is how we break free from the spiral of worry. We redirect our attention to the next constructive action, rather than lamenting what's beyond our influence. At around the 3-minute mark, I want to re-engage your attention. Let's fast forward from ancient Rome to the present day. Let's ask, how would you respond if everything you cherish was suddenly threatened? Would you crumble? Or would you find within you a reservoir of strength you never knew existed? That question pierces straight through the facade of daily busyness. It reminds us that life's biggest tests come without warning. The Stoics lived in a time of plagues, wars, and political upheavals. They understood, intimately, that life can flip with a single stroke of fate. And they hammered this lesson again and again. Real tranquility comes from how we shape our mind, not from illusions of external stability. As we progress, let me tell you another real-life example. James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy officer who was shot down over Vietnam, captured, and tortured for 7 years. He credited the teachings of Epictetus for helping him endure unimaginable suffering. He refused to let his captors break his spirit, even though they had total control over his physical circumstances. That's the culminating demonstration of the dichotomy of control. Your mind is your fortress. This story is our second re-engagement moment, an awe-inspiring display of Stoic discipline that transcends the centuries. The point is, no matter how dire the situation, we can always choose how we interpret and respond to it. Let's pause for a moment and ask a deeply challenging question. Have you ever considered that the stress and anxiety in your life might be a signal that you're trying to control things that are, by nature, uncontrollable? If that hits home, it's meant to. It's not easy to accept that we've been fighting the wrong battles, but it's liberating once we do. Moving forward, how do we practically incorporate these ideas so that they aren't just intellectual candy? That's where the second principle steps in. Principle 2, acknowledge impermanence. Everything changes: your job, your relationships, your wealth, even your physique and health. The Stoics believed this acceptance helps us embrace gratitude in the moment and readiness for the future. Instead of living in dread that we might lose what we have, we cultivate an appreciation for the fleeting nature of all things. Does that eliminate worry altogether? Maybe not, but it reframes how we see risk and loss. It instills a sense that if we prepare our mind, we can face any shift in fortune. I recall a friend who used to get paralyzed by the thought of losing her apartment due to economic uncertainty. The fear was so intense she sometimes couldn't sleep. By adopting a Stoic view, recognizing that even our sense of security in a home is subject to change, she began to see her living arrangement as a privilege for now, not an entitlement forever. That shift in perspective liberated her to think of backup plans, to save more diligently, and to reduce unnecessary expenses. In effect, acceptance of impermanence drove her to more productive actions, cutting away useless worry. We're building up to the midpoint of our journey, around that 6-minute mark in a typical video, where tension and stakes are highest. Let me paint another gripping scene. Imagine being in a hospital room, pacing the hallway while a loved one undergoes critical surgery. The worry gnaws at you, and your thoughts race. What if they don't make it? What if life will never be the same again? In Stoic terms, we'd confront the brutal possibility that we might lose this loved one. It's not about being cold or indifferent. It's about understanding that life, by its nature, includes loss. By acknowledging the fragility of life, we don't love less, we love more fiercely in the moment, cherishing each second. Because we accept that tomorrow is never guaranteed, we become fully present. Principle 3, voluntary discomfort. This is an intriguing one, often misunderstood. The Stoics advised periodically exposing yourself to mild discomfort, a cold shower, a simpler diet, or spending time away from material luxuries. Why? To remind yourself that you can survive without all your usual comforts. If you practice going without, you lessen the worry of losing them. It's that scene we might dramatize in our video with someone living for a few days in a minimalistic setup. No fancy coffee, no phone notifications, cooking basic meals. Initially, it feels like deprivation, but quickly it transforms into a sense of empowerment. I don't actually need all these extras to be okay. I can manage with less. That's a powerful blow to consumer culture's constant push for more, better, faster. The feeling of relief that comes with simplifying your life is tangible. You realize so much of your worry is tied to possessions or statuses that you mistakenly believe define your worth. Seneca famously practiced sleeping on the ground and wearing his worst clothes. He would say to himself, "Is this what I feared?" Meaning that once you confront potential hardship directly, it loses its power to terrify you. We're weaving these principles into a narrative tapestry. At around minute 6, we want a second big emotional punch, reminding you of the transformative nature of Stoicism. Perhaps we can show a clip of someone who overcame enormous odds, a soldier returning from deployment, using Stoic teachings to handle trauma, or an ex-athlete recovering from an injury, learning to find peace beyond their identity as a competitor. The concept remains the same, the pivot from external circumstances to internal mastery. Now, let's shift gears slightly, because I promised 10 Stoic principles that help us break free from worry. But I also want to keep you engaged with practical tips and deep reflections. Think of the script not just as intellectual content, but as an immersive quest. Let's keep layering in these principles. Principle 4, the power of perspective. Sometimes, stepping back and seeing the bigger picture dissolves half our worries. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself how tiny he was in the grand scope of the universe, a speck on a cosmic scale. Does that minimize our problems? Maybe. Or maybe it frees us from an inflated sense that each personal setback is the end of the world. Look at the stars, he'd say, figuratively and literally, as a reminder that existence is vast. Your frustrations and anxieties might seem monumental, but in cosmic terms, they're fleeting. That can be oddly comforting. Think of the times you ruminated for hours about a small conflict. You replay the conversation in your head, analyzing every nuance until you're sick with worry. Then, something truly big happens, maybe a family emergency or a global event, and suddenly that small conflict seems trivial. The Stoics wanted us to harness that shift in perspective even without calamity. Regularly remind yourself how large life is, how ephemeral each concern might be. Principle 5. Negative visualization. This might strike you as bleak, the practice of imagining worst-case scenarios. But hear me out. When you intentionally conjure the possibility of losing what you cherish, your health, your job, your loved ones, you paradoxically reduce the worry that lingers in your subconscious. Because you face that fear head-on. You can prepare mentally and emotionally. Then, instead of living in denial or crippling anxiety, you appreciate what you have now, and you fortify yourself against potential hardship. That doesn't make you unfeeling. It makes you realistic, and often, reality is kinder than our unspoken anxieties. For instance, every morning Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that he could meet ungrateful, deceitful, or rude people. By expecting it, he wasn't caught off guard or filled with resentment. This mental practice can be translated into daily life. Before starting your day, consider the difficulties you might face: traffic jams, an argument, a tough decision. By acknowledging them in advance, you soften the sting of surprise and reclaim your composure. Let me loop back to our cinematic narrative. We're in that mid-video zone, weaving faster between historical references and modern parallels. We see someone about to pitch a massive project at work, trembling with worry about potential failure. She closes her eyes, visualizes being rejected, misunderstood, maybe even laughed at. She feels the sting, imagines the worst-case scenario, breathes through it, and then opens her eyes, calmer, prepared. That's the essence. Readiness trumps worry. I'm offering glimpses of the 10 Stoic principles in action, but let's ensure we're anchoring them in something you can do today. Because if you simply passively listen, you'll gain awareness but maybe not transformation. So let me challenge you with another deep question. What if you tested yourself for a day, writing down any worry as soon as it arises, labeling it as either within your control or outside it, and then practicing these mental shifts to let go of what's outside? Doing this for even 24 hours can radically change how you perceive stress. Principle 6. Virtue as the highest good. The Stoics taught that a virtuous life embodying wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control is the only real foundation for lasting contentment. Why? Because external success can vanish in a heartbeat, while moral integrity is something no one can take from you. When you prioritize virtue, your self-worth isn't tossed around by the storms of fortune. This principle is crucial for worry because many anxieties arise from fear of failing external metrics. Job titles, income levels, social approval. By reorienting yourself toward character and virtue, you break the chains of those anxieties. You'd be less worried about losing face if your deepest measure of success is whether you acted ethically and with courage. Now, as we near the end of this first major segment, I want to paint the payoff. A life guided by Stoicism is not a life deprived of joy. Quite the opposite. It's a life anchored in clarity, empowerment, and resilience. Imagine yourself, months down the line, practicing these Stoic principles consistently. The frantic energy that once haunted your mornings starts to subside. You wake up with a sense of purpose, not dread. When you face challenges, you greet them with calm determination. That's the end goal, a mind at peace. Not because you live in a bubble of positivity, but because you've built an unshakable foundation. Yet, we've only scratched the surface with 6 of the 10 Stoic principles. There's more to explore: the role of self-reflection, the acceptance of fate, the harnessing of reason, and the importance of daily practice. Each principle weaves into the tapestry of a worry-free, or at least worry-tempered life. I want to remind you again, the difference between hearing these ideas and living them is the difference between reading about a marathon and running it. Stoicism demands that we engage with it regularly, forging new mental habits, questioning old assumptions, and refining our emotional responses. Let me finish this part with a final reflection. In the end, Stoicism aims at freedom, the freedom not to be enslaved by fears, not to be yanked around by desires, not to crumble under disappointment. Freedom, as Epictetus put it, is measured by our ability to choose our responses. In choosing these responses wisely, we unlock a life of authenticity and equanimity. We've traveled a significant distance in understanding how Stoicism stands as a bulwark against worry. We've delved into the first half of our 10 principles, explored how ancient wisdom lines up perfectly with modern challenges, and watched as these ideas transform crises into growth opportunities. Now, in the next segment, we'll uncover the remaining Stoic principles, layering more depth on how to systematically free ourselves from worry, cultivate resilience, and maintain emotional freedom no matter the external storm. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, I invite you to keep going. Next, you'll discover how to train your mind like a warrior, guard it against negativity, and harness the immense power of rational thought to navigate life's chaos with grace. We'll explore why Stoics valued self-control so profoundly, how they reconciled the acceptance of fate with the drive for excellence, and what daily routines can crystallize these teachings into unbreakable habits. Are you ready to dive deeper into the remaining principles and finish building your unshakable Stoic framework for breaking free from worry? Then let's press on. The Stoic warrior within. Embrace self-mastery and rise above every storm. I want you to imagine a grand stage where the lights dim, the audience grows silent, and the tension of life's struggles takes center spotlight. We've explored the first 6 Stoic principles that can shatter the shackles of worry, focusing on what's in our control, acknowledging impermanence, welcoming discomfort, shifting perspectives, practicing negative visualization, and holding virtue as the compass for our actions. Now, let's pick up where we left off and delve into the final 4 principles to complete the picture. Along the way, we'll weave in concrete advice, powerful stories, and probing questions that challenge our everyday assumptions. As we continue, picture yourself not just as a viewer but as an actor in your own life's theater, rehearsing Stoicism daily until it becomes your automatic response to every cue, crisis, or challenge. To begin, let's revisit that question that still echoes in our minds. Have you ever considered that the stress and anxiety in your life might be a signal that you're trying to control the uncontrollable? If this resonates, remember that awareness is already a turning point. You're beginning to see that freedom from worry isn't about controlling everything outside yourself. It's about mastering your own perceptions, decisions, and reactions. With that mindset, let's step onto a new path, where we shift from merely accepting adversity to actively harnessing it for transformation. This is where the Stoic warrior within us arises. Principle 7, amor fati, love of fate. Far from being fatalistic, amor fati is an affirmation. Instead of merely tolerating life's ups and downs, the Stoics believed in embracing them wholeheartedly. The premise is simple yet radical. Everything that happens, good or bad, presents an opportunity for growth, virtue, and wisdom. When we adopt amor fati, we're not just stoically enduring storms, we welcome them as integral to our story. Imagine a friend who gets laid off unexpectedly. The typical response is fear, bitterness, or shame. But if we approach this with amor fati, we see it as a moment for reevaluation. Maybe this job has been limiting her growth. Maybe it's time for a new direction. So instead of moping, she retools her resume, learns new skills, and finds a role better aligned with her values. The layoff, once a dreaded moment, becomes a pivot point. By celebrating this event instead of cursing it, she transforms despair into opportunity. But how do we ingrain amor fati day to day? A helpful exercise is to reflect on a past hardship that, in hindsight, led to something good. Maybe a breakup spurred personal development. A rejection letter led you to a path you truly love. Or an injury forced you to discover new interests. Revisit that story. Notice how the event initially seemed awful, but ultimately enriched your life. Realize that the same principle can apply to today's adversities. Worry often arises when we treat challenges like insurmountable threats. What if we treat them like plot twists that shape our hero's arc? This mental shift doesn't remove pain but can reduce worry by giving you a narrative of growth rather than defeat. Let's fuse this idea into our ongoing story of modern Stoic application. Picture a young athlete who, after years of training, tears a ligament just before her big competition. Initially, she's in shock. Everything she worked for feels gone in an instant, but she summons the essence of Stoicism. Adversity can be a teacher, even a gift. She decides to channel her energy into intense mental conditioning, learning about sports psychology, developing leadership skills by supporting her teammates from the sidelines. Over time, she recovers, and not only does she return physically stronger, but she now has a mental advantage, an unshakable resilience forged by loving her fate, not just enduring it. That's the kind of transformation Stoics champion. Now, let's press further and ask ourselves a question that might disrupt your usual thinking. What if, instead of cowering before uncertainty, you viewed every twist of fate as a chance to evolve? Pause on that. Let the question sink in, because often our worries come from a fear that negative circumstances will break us. Stoicism says that might be true if you let them, but if you greet hardships with curiosity and gratitude, you reclaim your power to shape the narrative. Principle 8. Practice mindfulness and reflection. In modern parlance, we often talk about mindfulness. While it's frequently associated with meditation or Buddhist principles, Stoics had their own version: constant vigilance over your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily to keep track of his mental state and moral progress. Seneca penned letters that served as deep reflections on anger, grief, and other emotional challenges. Epictetus advised students to self-examine, especially after they'd made a mistake. Ask what triggered it, how they felt, and how they could do better next time. This reflection acts like a mirror, showing us our mental patterns so we can redirect them toward calm and virtue. Let me share a personal story. Once, I was so stressed about missing a career opportunity that my entire day felt overshadowed by anxiety. It wasn't until I sat quietly that night, journaling about my fears, that I realized I was catastrophizing. My assumptions were far larger than reality. Writing about it forced me to articulate that worry in plain text. I might not get another shot at success. Once I read it back to myself, it struck me as an overgeneralization. By simply observing this irrational belief, I disarmed its power. The next morning, I emailed a colleague for guidance, and through that, discovered an alternate pathway. The worry had dissipated because I recognized it for what it was: a mental distortion. In the context of our Stoic video, this principle can be illustrated by rapid scene changes, someone going through the hustle of daily life, then pausing for a moment of quiet introspection each evening. Through journaling, breathwork, or silent reflection, they notice the day's high-pressure events, maybe an argument with a friend, an intense deadline, or a piece of unsettling news. By separating the external event from the internal narrative, they realize they can choose a more helpful perspective. As they repeat this nightly routine, their worries gradually lose their stranglehold. But you might wonder, what about pressing crises that can't be solved by mere journaling? That's fair. Stoicism doesn't claim to whisk away life-threatening problems, but it does say that mindful reflection helps you approach crises with a clear head, which drastically boosts your odds of responding effectively rather than being hijacked by panic. So, the next time you find yourself knotted in worry, consider asking, is this concern a reflection of reality, or is it a product of my unexamined assumptions? That's the power of consistent self-scrutiny. Principle 9. Harness the rational mind. One of the cornerstones of Stoic thought is that humans possess reason. This reason is our unique faculty, a mental pilot that can steer us through emotional turbulence if we let it. Worry often thrives in irrational soil, exaggerated fears, unfounded assumptions, distorted predictions. The Stoics propose a simple but demanding practice. When anxiety arises, examine the evidence. Ask yourself, is there real proof that my worry is justified? Or am I spinning a hypothetical worst-case scenario? The trick is to do this calmly and systematically, like a detective. If the worry is based on real data, you can plan. If it's not, you can release it or at least reduce its emotional weight. Let me offer an example from the business world. An entrepreneur might be convinced their startup is doomed because they've lost one major client. As worry sets in, they catastrophize. This is it, we'll never recover. We're going under. A Stoic approach would have them systematically analyze their numbers, potential alternative clients, market trends, and so on. Maybe they discover that while the loss is significant, it's not fatal. They have savings, prospects, and perhaps a chance to pivot to a new niche. By engaging rational thought, they defuse the doomsday scenario. This doesn't eliminate hard work or challenge, but it quells that paralyzing dread. Philosophically, this principle is tied to the idea that we are rational creatures first. Emotions like fear, anger, and sorrow might be automatic reactions, but reason is our capacity to interpret and moderate those feelings. When we harness this capacity, we tackle problems methodically. Remember, the Stoics weren't anti-emotion. They recognized that unbridled emotion can lead us to suffering. By aligning with reason, we don't become robots. We become more humane, more in control, more empathetic, and far less prone to pointless panic. At this juncture in our video, I want to inject another powerful real-life story, maybe about a soldier in a high-stakes situation. They're out on patrol. Tensions are high. Threats are everywhere. Without rational thinking, that soldier could succumb to crippling fear. But with training, self-discipline, and a Stoic mindset, they calmly assess the situation, weigh the risks, and make measured decisions. Even though their heart might be pounding, they remain collected. That's the essence of Stoic rationality in action, using reason as a shield and guide. Now we approach the final Stoic principle that weaves all the others into a cohesive life philosophy. Principle 10, continuous practice and acceptance of progress. This principle underlines that Stoicism isn't something you read once and master. It's a practice, a daily discipline, something that evolves with you over time. Life throws new obstacles your way at every stage. Adolescence, early career, relationships, parenthood, retirement, old age. You never arrive at perfect Stoicism. You cultivate it like a gardener tending the same plot year after year. Some days are filled with flourishing blooms. Other days see weeds popping up. The key is consistent effort and acceptance of your own learning curve. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly chided himself in his meditations, reminding himself to return to virtue, to keep perspective, to not let anger or pettiness sway him. Think about that. This was the Emperor of Rome, arguably the most powerful man of his time, yet he had to coach himself daily. That reveals a crucial truth. Stoicism is not about being superhuman or never feeling worry. It's about how quickly you return to your principles when you do feel worry. Perfection isn't the goal. Consistent improvement is. Let's tie that back to our modern context. Suppose you try to be stoic about a tense family gathering. You tell yourself you'll remain calm, rational, and kind. But the moment you step into the house, old triggers flare up. Maybe a sibling criticizes you, or a parent belittles your job choice. You feel your composure dissolving. You react with irritation. Later that night, you're disappointed with yourself. At this point, you have a choice. Wallow in self-blame or turn the lens of Stoicism upon yourself. You reflect honestly, you own your lapse, and you vow to do better next time. That's continuous practice. You keep returning to Stoic principles. Even if you falter, over time, you find that the triggers lose their grip. You build emotional muscle. That's how you truly conquer worry, through incremental mastery, not unrealistic perfection. To illustrate the payoff of continuous practice, consider the phenomenon of post-traumatic growth. Individuals who face extreme adversity like loss, catastrophe, or personal tragedy often discover a deeper reservoir of strength, empathy, and wisdom after they've worked through their trauma. Stoicism's daily practice can accelerate and guide that growth process. It transforms raw pain into lessons that lead to an enriched, more resilient life. That's the final layer of the script. We're not just coping with worry. We're harnessing it to become more complete individuals. Now, let's recap these final 4 principles in our narrative, weaving them into a single story thread for clarity. Imagine a person at a crossroads, with major life events happening all at once: a job layoff, relationship troubles, and a health scare. Under normal circumstances, we might be overwhelmed by worry, but imagine this person adopting the Stoic approach. First, they invoke amor fati, welcoming these challenges as catalysts for growth rather than punishments. Next, they commit to nightly mindfulness and reflection, journaling about each day's anxieties, seeing patterns, and finding calm in self-awareness. Third, they harness their rational mind, plotting a methodical plan for their job search, seeking therapy for relationship issues, and following medical advice carefully. Finally, they embrace continuous practice, understanding there will be stumbles, emotional breakdowns, and moments of doubt. Each time they slip, they resolve to keep going, refining their Stoic approach step by step. This doesn't mean life becomes instantly easy. They still face heartbreak, financial uncertainty, and fear. But the difference is how they manage these challenges internally. Stoicism acts like a lighthouse beam cutting through a foggy night, guiding them toward safer shores. That sense of navigational clarity is precisely what breaks the chain of endless worry. With all 10 principles on the table, you might be wondering, where do I start? The beauty of Stoicism is that any of these principles can be your gateway. Maybe you feel drawn to the dichotomy of control, or perhaps you're intrigued by negative visualization, or maybe you want to jump right into mindful journaling. Wherever you begin, the act of practice itself is transformative. Over time, these principles intertwine naturally, creating a strong mental framework that stands firm against life storms. One more deeply challenging question: what if the level of worry in your life directly correlates to how far you've strayed from these foundational practices of self-awareness, acceptance, and reason? The question has teeth because it suggests that anxiety isn't just a random byproduct of modern living. It might be a sign we're ignoring or neglecting ancient wisdom that's perfectly applicable to today. Reflect on that. Perhaps your anxious moments can be harnessed as signals to rededicate yourself to Stoic insight. In our video timeline, we're likely moving into the final segment, where we tie the overarching theme together. We started by hooking you with the dramatic notion that resilience, freedom, and emotional control could be found within. We introduced you to the rich tapestry of Stoic philosophy: Zeno's founding, Epictetus's stark lessons as a slave, Seneca's moral epistles, and Marcus Aurelius's wartime reflections. We saw how Stoic principles remain urgent and essential in an era of constant stimuli, where technology intensifies our vulnerabilities. We examined how real-life stories, from historical figures to modern entrepreneurs, from soldiers to everyday individuals, prove the enduring power of Stoicism. Now, our concluding move is to invite you into the arena of implementation, because watching a video or reading a script, no matter how inspiring, won't change your life by itself. What will change your life is deciding that you are not content to remain a passive victim of worry. Instead, you choose to become a Stoic warrior, forging yourself in the fires of daily challenges, emerging each time a bit more composed, a bit stronger, and a lot wiser. As we near the crescendo, imagine a final montage: old images of Roman busts flickering alongside modern cityscapes, a collage of personal triumphs, a parent reading Marcus Aurelius in a hospital waiting room to maintain calm, a student using amor fati to reframe rejection letters, an athlete practicing voluntary discomfort to strengthen mental fortitude. The message is clear. Stoicism is a living tradition that breathes relevance into every era, offering a path to unshakable freedom from worry. Before we transition to our last segment, I want to leave you with a crucial concept that the Stoics often emphasize: memento mori, or the reminder of mortality. It might sound morbid, but it's actually a clarion call to live fully while you can, and to keep your priorities in check. Yes, life is fleeting, but that very fact can illuminate the preciousness of each moment. Sometimes worry arises from forgetting how transient our existence is. Ironically, remembering our finite time can liberate us from the petty fears that consume our energy. As we bring this part to a close, I encourage you to visualize yourself a few months from now, consistently practicing Stoic reflections, focusing on what's in your control, welcoming adversity as a teacher, leaning into reason, and maintaining a journal to track your emotional progress. Picture how you might handle conflict or uncertainty then, compared to how you handle it today. That future you stands with a calm, steady gaze. Maybe you still feel pangs of anxiety at times, but they no longer debilitate you. Instead, they remind you to return to your guiding principles, a mental map that keeps you focused, calm, and resolute. That's the promise of Stoicism. Not a life free from storms, but a life in which storms can't shake the harbor of your mind. The final question: will you commit to the daily discipline that transforms these timeless principles into your living reality? Because if you do, you'll break free from worry in ways you never thought possible. We've now covered all 10 empowering Stoic principles. We've seen how they coalesce into a robust framework for living a life unburdened by incessant anxiety. From the dichotomy of control to negative visualization, from amor fati to unrelenting practice, these teachings challenge us to elevate our daily existence from reactive worry to proactive mastery. The key takeaway is that Stoicism isn't an intellectual hobby. It's a path to liberation, a path we walk step by step, day by day, mistake by mistake, reflection by reflection. If you're ready to anchor this wisdom and truly embody it, let's continue to the third and final part. There, we'll bring everything together, culminating in a grand finale that leaves you fully equipped to live with unbreakable calm and unwavering purpose. We'll discuss how to integrate Stoic practice into all aspects of your life, your work, your relationships, and your personal aspirations. If you've ever yearned for a life where worry doesn't rule you, this next installment will be your blueprint. So, do you wish to continue? Unshakable Stoic living. How to integrate these principles and conquer life storms forever. We've arrived at the grand finale of our exploration into Stoicism and its power to release us from the grip of worry. So far, we've journeyed through 10 Stoic principles that breathe life into ancient wisdom, grounding us in calm and reason amid the demands of modern living. We know that true freedom is built upon what we do with these principles, not just what we read or hear. Now we stand at the crossroads where knowledge must become action. In this culminating part, let us dive into the heart of day-to-day Stoic practice, weaving our principles into real routines and mindsets that hold firm through life storms. We'll also explore how Stoicism can coexist with other personal goals, relationships, and even our more whimsical ambitions. By the end, I hope you'll see Stoicism not as a rigid code but as a vibrant, adaptable philosophy that can permeate every corner of your life, securing for you an unwavering sense of peace and purpose. When we talk about day-to-day integration, the first step is to acknowledge that change never happens all at once. We often get excited about a new idea, like Stoicism, and want to revamp our entire lives overnight. But that zeal can fizzle if it's not accompanied by steady, incremental practice. So, to truly embody Stoicism, we need daily microhabits, structured reflections, and consistent reminders. Think of your mind like a muscle that needs training every day. Some days you might feel strong. Other days you'll feel like you're struggling just to keep your composure. That's natural. The important part is to show up, over and over, reaffirming your commitment to these principles until they become second nature. There is a scene I'd like you to imagine. A man or woman, living in a bustling city, waking up at dawn. The coffee machine gurgles in the background. Before diving into the phone or scanning the endless stream of news, This person opens a small notebook and writes a few lines, perhaps a Stoic quote or a question for self-reflection. What challenges might I face today? And how will I remain calm and purposeful amid them? These few minutes set a tone of intention for the day. It might sound small, but these moments of stillness and examination before the world rushes in are where Stoicism starts to take root. Without that conscious anchoring, our minds get swept away by the demands and dramas of modern life before we've even had a chance to remind ourselves of what matters most. From there, as the day unfolds, an erratic commute, a demanding boss, a barrage of emails, and personal responsibilities looming, Stoicism can feel tested. You might remember the dichotomy of control in fleeting glimpses. I can't change the traffic or the deadlines, but I can master my response. I can remain calm, adapt, and act with integrity. Sometimes it'll work, and you'll feel a sense of triumph over your old reactions. Other times, you'll stumble. Perhaps you snap at someone or lose patience waiting in line. That's when the evening reflection becomes critical. You jot down what went astray and how you can handle it better tomorrow. Instead of berating yourself, you adopt a curious, almost scientific approach. My reaction was driven by frustration, but frustration is rooted in the desire for control I do not possess. By observing rather than condemning yourself, you make room for slow, steady improvement. The next day, you'll handle a similar trigger with a bit more composure. Over time, this day-night cycle, morning intention, evening reflection creates a robust mental framework. Worry starts to lose its foothold because you're no longer surrendering to every emotional twist. Instead, you're cultivating an internal steadiness, a sense of agency based on carefully chosen responses rather than unconscious reactions. This cycle also integrates well with several of the principles we've covered. Negative visualization in the morning, anticipating potential stressors, mindfulness and rational assessment throughout the day, and reflection in the evening to reinforce what went right and what could improve. Day by day, you build a self-directed mind that finds fewer reasons to spin into anxiety. Now, let's connect these practices to relationships. Often, our closest bonds, family, partners, friends, can be a source of great joy but also intense worry. We fret about their well-being, about their approval, or about conflicts that arise when personalities clash. Stoicism teaches us that other people's choices, moods, and perceptions are outside our direct control. That can be both comforting and frightening. We want our loved ones to thrive, but we can't always ensure it. So how do we integrate Stoicism here? We learn to support others with genuine compassion, do our best to communicate honestly and lovingly, but ultimately release the illusion that we can micromanage their experiences or outcomes. If a friend is making self-destructive choices, we can express concern and offer help. Yet we must acknowledge they have the freedom to reject it. If a family member criticizes us unfairly, we can try to clarify misunderstandings, but we can't force them to see our perspective. Once we internalize that boundary, where our responsibility ends and someone else's begins, we liberate ourselves from the continuous swirl of anxiety over others' behaviors or opinions. Of course, letting go in this way doesn't make us cold or detached. A hallmark of Stoicism is the cultivation of virtue, including compassion and justice. We care, we love, we give, but we do so with clarity that the final outcome of our efforts is not fully in our hands. This perspective can be profoundly freeing. Imagine no longer wasting energy on attempts to rewire someone's personality or angsting over their every life choice. Instead, you offer what you can with sincerity, and you remain at peace even if they don't adopt your suggestions. It's not apathy. It's mature acceptance of reality. This approach can diminish endless worry that so often pollutes our relationships. It lets love and empathy flourish unencumbered by the desperation for control. As we reflect on letting go, consider a question. In what areas of my life do I most crave control over others' choices? And how would it feel to release that desire? This question can feel uncomfortable because it highlights that worry is frequently entangled with control issues. But discomfort often points to the gateway of real change. By leaning into this question, you confront the tensions that drive you to worry in the first place, and you invite a calmer mindset into your everyday interactions. Another arena where Stoicism can profoundly help is in career or ambition. Modern culture praises hustle and achievements, fueling the idea that your identity hinges on how well you succeed in external metrics. Yet, with such intense pressure, worry flourishes. We fear failure, fear being outdone, fear lost opportunities. Stoicism recalibrates these fears by insisting that our measure of success should focus on virtue, integrity, and effort, elements we control. If you bring your best to a project, handle setbacks gracefully, treat colleagues ethically, and maintain your moral compass, you've won on the Stoic scoreboard, regardless of whether the promotion or external accolade follows. This principle doesn't mean we give up on reaching goals. Rather, we remain motivated but unhook ourselves from the crippling anxiety of, what if I don't get the outcome I desire? Because you might not, and if you don't, you still have your character, your ability to try again, and the lessons you've gained from the process. Ironically, when we cling less to a specific outcome, we free up mental space to be more creative and effective. The desperation eases, replaced by a calm focus that often yields better results in the end. Ask yourself, what if my career was less about climbing a ladder and more about refining who I am in each professional challenge? That shift might open a different perspective on how you tackle daily responsibilities. Speaking of daily responsibilities, let's not forget the significance of physical routines that reinforce Stoic tenets. We touched on voluntary discomfort, taking a cold shower, limiting our reliance on luxuries, or fasting occasionally, as a tool to remind us that we can handle discomfort and that we need far less than we think to be content. When life inevitably hurls discomfort at us, maybe a health crisis, a sudden breakup, or a financial hit, having practiced lesser forms of discomfort can cushion the shock. Your mind recognizes the feeling, I've dealt with difficult sensations before, and I came through the other side. That self-confidence wards off the avalanche of worry that typically accompanies unexpected hardship. This might sound trivial, after all. How does taking a cold shower compare to losing a job? But in principle, it's the same muscle, the ability to endure short-term adversity with composure, trusting that you have the mental resilience to navigate bigger storms. To keep Stoicism alive in day-to-day life, some people create visual or auditory cues, post-it notes on the mirror with a Marcus Aurelius quote, phone reminders with lines like, focus on what you can control, or a daily Stoic reading plan that keeps the philosophy fresh in the mind. These little nudges function like a personal coach whispering in your ear at critical moments. Perhaps you're about to walk into a high-stakes meeting, so your phone pings with a reminder of Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. Suddenly you catch yourself about to spiral into fear, but you remember you have a choice. That's the difference. Awareness layered on awareness, day after day, building an internal fortress that worry finds increasingly difficult to penetrate. Let's also talk about existential questions, life's big uncertainties that loom over many of us. Am I on the right path? What if I'm wasting my potential? Is there meaning in what I do? Stoicism isn't exactly a religion, but it does give us a framework for grappling with these cosmic worries. It reminds us that while we can't always discern some grand cosmic plan, we can choose to live honorably and meaningfully in the slice of life we occupy. We can hone virtues, wisdom, courage, self-control, justice, regardless of how large or small our sphere of influence is. Our sense of purpose, then, isn't solely about achieving something that the world applauds. It's about living in alignment with the best of our human capacities. When you anchor your sense of meaning in internal values rather than external validation, your existential anxieties may soften. You realize that each day presents a chance to exercise virtue, to learn, to grow, and to share kindness with the people around you. That's an unassailable foundation for meaning. Of course, none of this suggests we ignore the broader world or its challenges. The Stoics believed we are part of a larger community, humanity, and that we share a duty to contribute in ways we can. This sense of civic responsibility or global citizenship goes hand in hand with personal tranquility. If you only turn inward, you risk apathy. If you only look outward, you risk burning out in worry and despair. The Stoic sweet spot is to balance these: care about the world, act where you can be effective, yet maintain the composure that reminds you not to shoulder the entire planet's problems as if they were yours alone to solve. This sense of proportion helps you remain engaged without succumbing to hopelessness. You do what you can, where you can, and you let go of the rest. Now, let's fold in a story that captures the full integration of Stoic living. Imagine a single parent, working hard to raise 2 children. The days are a blur: school drop-offs, meal prep, job demands, bills. Worry is a constant companion. Fear about finances, the children's futures, and a society that feels uncertain. Each morning, though, this parent lights a small candle and reads a brief passage from Seneca. Something about how adversity can refine us. They breathe, center themselves, and remind themselves they're strong enough to handle the day's challenges. On the commute, they mentally rehearse negative visualization. What if the car breaks down? I'll figure it out. What if I get criticized at work? I'll remain composed and respond constructively. Arriving at work, they post a note on their screen that reads, "Focus on what I can control." Inevitably, chaos arises: an upset child, a disagreement with a coworker, a surge of unexpected expenses. Instead of going into panic mode, the parent recalls the Stoic principle: worry won't solve this, action will. They take methodical steps, talk calmly to the child, find a solution or compromise with the coworker, and plan their budget more carefully. That night, after the children are asleep, they spend 5 minutes journaling. Where did I stay calm? And where did I let fear take the wheel? Over time, they see patterns. They notice triggers that spark the most anxiety. They begin to mentally prepare for those triggers in advance. Gradually, worry loosens its grip. Challenges remain, but the parent navigates them with a newfound serenity, seeing each day as a chance to practice virtue and to strengthen their resilience. This is what real Stoic integration looks like in the thick of modern responsibilities, fusing reflection, preparation, and purposeful action into a cohesive approach to life. As you reflect on such a portrait, you might ask, what if I intentionally built similar rituals into my own life, bit by bit, until they shaped a calmer, more purposeful me? That's the essence of this final question. It's not whether Stoicism works, but whether you'll work at Stoicism, because the philosophy itself is proven by centuries of adherence. From slaves to emperors, from soldiers to entrepreneurs, from single parents to world leaders. The missing piece is whether you're willing to invest in consistent practice and introspection. Some days, you'll catch yourself sliding into old habits, catastrophic thinking, getting lost in arguments that serve no purpose, or procrastinating to avoid discomfort. In those moments, Stoicism calls us back gently but firmly. You are the guardian of your thoughts. If this is a battle, it's a battle within. Instead of condemning yourself, you note the slip-up, learn from it, and correct course. That is how character is forged in real time. Think of it like forging metal, the repeated cycle of heating, hammering, cooling. Each pass shapes you into something sturdier, more capable of withstanding life's fires. We should also acknowledge that the full integration of Stoic living is rarely linear. You might find yourself making leaps in certain areas, like letting go of the need for others' approval, yet still get trapped by old anxieties around finances or body image. That's normal. Human growth is uneven. The key is to keep chipping away at each domain where worry seeps in, applying the Stoic lens to dissolve illusions of control and reinforce the power of internal mastery. Over months or even years, you see that your mental climate starts to shift. Moments of panic become rarer and pass faster. Joy and contentment are more accessible, not because your outer life is perfect, but because your inner life has learned to adapt and remain steady. Now we come to a final reflection on how to maintain this practice in the long run, beyond just a passing phase. One helpful strategy is to connect with a community, virtual or local, where people share their experiences applying Stoicism. Hearing how others tackle real-world problems through this lens can spark new insights and keep you motivated. Alternatively, you might schedule monthly check-ins with yourself, asking, "Have I drifted from these principles? Where is my worry creeping back?" Could even be something more ceremonial, like revisiting a favorite Stoic text each season. The repetition of reading the same core insights at different stages of your life reveals new angles and deeper understandings. At this point, we might wonder, will I ever be completely free of worry? The honest Stoic answer is that worry is part of the human condition, a reflex tied to our survival instincts and imaginative minds. However, we can drastically reduce worry's intensity and frequency by refusing to feed it with irrational beliefs, illusions of control, and misguided attachments. We learn to let worry knock on the door without inviting it in for tea. Over time, the knocking becomes less persistent because it no longer finds a receptive audience. That is the real victory, not making negative emotions vanish, but transforming your relationship to them so that they no longer govern your behavior or steal your peace. Having reached the edges of our journey together, I want to leave you with a final, provocative question. Now that you understand the principles to free yourself from worry, what is the cost of staying the same? Reflect on that carefully. If you continue to let anxiety, stress, and the need for control run the show, how will that impact your health, relationships, and sense of purpose 5 or 10 years from now? Stoicism, at its core, is an invitation to break the chains of needless suffering. It's not a quick fix or a shallow motivational platitude. It's a path that demands discipline, courage, and self-honesty, but the rewards mental clarity, emotional resilience, and genuine freedom are well worth the effort. As we close, envision a grand, cinematic finale in our video. Imagine you standing in a vast amphitheater reminiscent of ancient Greece or Rome, the morning sun illuminating the stone columns around you. In your hand, you hold a simple journal filled with your reflections, quotes, and daily commitments to living stoically. Echoes of centuries' worth of wisdom float through the air, reminding you that you're part of a long lineage of seekers who have wrestled with the same fears and uncertainties. You feel a renewed sense of resolve. You step forward into the next chapter of your life, aware that storms will come but confident that your mind is no longer a slave to worry. The gates open, the sun climbs higher, and you walk forth with a calm determination that says, "No matter what happens out there, I will remain the master of my inner domain." That's the power of Stoicism, fully integrated into every area of life. It's not about being a flawless sage on a mountaintop. It's about being fully human, aware of vulnerabilities yet rooted in unshakable principles that guide every choice, every response, every moment of existence. You walk away from this journey knowing that the real work begins now, in the little decisions you make each day. It's in how you greet a stressful situation at work, how you handle personal disappointments, and how you cultivate loving relationships despite inherent uncertainties. Each act, each breath, becomes an opportunity to practice wisdom, courage, and self-control. One day, you'll look back and realize that while life didn't stop throwing curveballs, you learned to meet them with equanimity, and that's a freedom that no external force can take from you. We've traveled together from the origins of Stoicism in ancient Greece to its relevance in our chaotic modern world. We explored how these 10 empowering principles disarm our worries, and we've now arrived at a place of integration, a blueprint for unshakable Stoic living. If you embrace this path, you aren't just another passive bystander to your anxieties. You're the lead actor in your life's drama, directing your energy with wisdom. So I'll leave you with a final statement. The storms will never cease, but neither will the inner light that Stoicism can kindle in you. May that light guide you to the calm, courageous, and free life you deserve.